you when you're ready.
Go for it.
Sounds good. Hey, everybody. I'm Carson Block. I'm so glad to be with you and so honored to be here to tell you about the Broadband Toolkit that we have. It's something that's free, something that's been funded through grant, and we want to tell you about it. And I'm Carson Block. I want to introduce my partner with us today, but I have her name is Stephanie Stenberg, and she works for Internet2. And Internet2 is a national organization that provides connectivity and training and all sorts of things for lots and lots of like educational sorts of networks and regional R&E networks, research and education networks across the country. I am a library technology consultant. My name is Carson Block, and I've been working in library technology for 26 years or so. I started out when the web was just starting out in libraries, and so I've learned a lot in that process. And the two of us, we are the project co-directors for the Towards Gigabit Libraries Toolkit. What this is, it's a powerful free tool to help all libraries learn about and improve current broadband structure. And there were two grants that put this together. We're in our second grant right now, but our first grant is the same as our current grant, and we have an emphasis on rural and tribal libraries to help improve things, because this is who needs the help the most. A lot of us don't have a ready access to different sorts of things that we need to improve our connectivity. So this is who the toolkit is for. It is for you. If you're in a rural or tribal library, if you are in any type of library, it's something that can help you. We with Grant, and I apologize, I'm the grateful guest of a library system in New York, and there's vacuuming going out outside the room. I so hope that you can hear me okay. This was a Institute of Museum and Library Services grant is what has made the toolkit possible. And so this started in 2015. It was a 2-year grant to develop this training curriculum and self-assessment material for library broadband infrastructure with this target of rural and tribal libraries. And we partnered state library offices, research and education networks and tribal areas to be able to get the toolkit out. It was really great because we thought we could only visit 30 libraries for this pilot. We were actually able to get out to 60 libraries and really try it out and test it and refine it and make it better. In 2020, we got a new grant. It was a 2-year grant to improve upon the toolkit and expand its reach throughout the US. In addition to focusing on rural and tribal libraries, we're also exploring urban areas where there is a need for better connectivity. So let me tell you a little bit about the toolkit. There's some web links on the screen. What I'll do after my presentation, I'll come back and I'll copy all of these web links into the chat so that you can get at them much easier than this. But you can download something that's brand new. It's only been released like almost like this week. This is the 1.5 version of the Towards Gigabit Libraries Toolkit. Our original toolkit was very good, but we have made a great deal of improvements to it. In fact, we've made it twice as big, but I don't want that to intimidate you. I still want you to get it. What we're finding, especially if you're a technology novice, it might look like a big toolkit, but once you open it up, it's no problem. It's very friendly and very accessible to everyone. That's how we've been working on it. But I'll copy this in. You can get the brand new version of the toolkit. We also have a video that gives an overview of what the toolkit is, a short video. But basically, it does 3 things at the same time. It looks like an educational workbook because it is an educational workbook, but it's also a self-assessment tool, something that you can use in your library to assess the condition of your technology equipment and look for areas that might need to be improved. And frankly, all of us need to improve our networks. So this helps us do that. But it's also an advocacy tool. And this advocacy tool is the more that we know about what we need, the better we are equipped to go out and get those things. Components of the toolkit is very broad reaching. We have technology inventory that includes looking at your broadband connection, your wired network, your network devices, the wireless and Wi-Fi network, the computer end user devices, the things where we experience our connectivity, broadband services and activities. We have technology and operations support, and new sections on building a network of support to help you advocate for your library and to gather peers together to help you with this, and broadband and IT funding opportunities as well. And there's just a lot of really cool stuff in there, and I'm going to go through some of these things. The approach of the toolkit is very simple. To help someone do this on their own, especially if you're a tech novice, there are questions that we ask you about looking at, for instance, the inventory of your equipment. Right after the question is a resource or an explanation on how to answer that question. So we either explain how to answer that question within the toolkit itself, or we provide a link or several links to more information so that you can feel confident in answering these questions. And so this back and forth that you're able to do as you go through the toolkit helps bring your knowledge up about your technology and to help find things that you need to do. There's many ways to use this toolkit. One thing it does is it helps you record a shareable snapshot of your library's IT and broadband infrastructure. You can create an actual inventory of what you have and what you need. You can also prepare for different funding cycles, including E-rate. If you were able to be eligible for E-rate, and E-rate is something that you would like to pursue, that this helps with those, but it also helps with so many other funding opportunities, especially funding opportunities that we've had recently as a result of recovery efforts from the pandemic. It helps open communication as well. One of the things that we found with the toolkit is sometimes our library staff, they talk one language, our IT people talk another language, and sometimes we're not able to communicate. This helps us to communicate very powerfully with each other because we have the same vocabulary and the same understanding of the concepts involved in our technology. And it has been very powerful in bringing people around the same table to talk about things, sometimes for the very first time, between a library person and an IT person, talking the same language and able to solve a problem together because language is not being a barrier, technology language. This also helps you address specific problems you're having just by completing different sections of the toolkit. We get down to the nitty-gritty and help discover things that may not be performing as well as you would like, and then have recommendations on what you can do about it. And that, of course, gets you to this baseline for making improvement. And the best part of this for most people is you do not need to be a techie to do this. You don't need to have IT knowledge. It is written with a layperson in mind. And so even though we've done that, technology people have endorsed the toolkit. They find it to be very helpful as well. And it's very accessible to people with zero technology knowledge. So let me go through the toolkit sections, and we will have time for questions after the presentation. I would love to answer any questions that you have here, but we'll hold those questions to the end, and I will answer all of those questions. I would love to hear, for instance, some of the experiences that you have with technology, and perhaps we can find a way that the toolkit can help you. The first section is pretty big, but it's broken into nice bite-sized chunks. And it is the technology inventory of your library. And this is looking at those key pieces. And this includes the data network that you have, the computers that you have in your library, and everything in between. So we have the data network on one side, we have our end user devices, computers, laptops, tablets, other things, and everything in between. And it helps you understand what sort of equipment that you have now and determine if you need different equipment or even more equipment in the future. And some of the areas that we cover are the broadband connection that's serving your library, the network devices that are attached there, the wired network, and the power. We talked about power. Power is such an interesting thing. We need a lot more power distributed for, especially to recharge our wireless devices, our phones, and our tablets than we ever imagined we would need. And that's something we cover. Also looking at wireless network the wireless network and the power that we need for it, and of course those computer end user devices. And over on the right, you can see an example, something that we took a snapshot from the toolkit, where we're talking about identifying what's called a router. That's the kind of the traffic conductor in your data network. It tells when you put your computer connected to your network and let your network find those resources on the internet, retrieve that information you need, and come back. And we this is part of the inventory, is just understanding the make and the model of your router. The next section covers broadband services and broadband activities. And this is the types of stuff. This is why we have technology at all. It's not just about the tech, of course, but it's about the resources that we would like to have access to and to be able to use powerfully. So in this section, we talk about things like bandwidth that we need, some things like hotspot lending, which some libraries do. Talk about filtering a little bit, internet filtering, because of course, filtering is one of those requirements for certain federal funding opportunities and other services that we would like to offer. And as you can see, we have the section that we're showing you here on the toolkit talks about a really tricky question. How much bandwidth do you need? My question, and we have lots and lots of ways to determine the amount of bandwidth that you need, but I wanted to share a concept that I think you might find helpful. Bandwidth, or broadband, has been defined a couple of different ways. And in most library circles, we like to define bandwidth as being very fast. We would like all libraries to have a minimum of 100 megabits download and 100 megabits upload. And that is what's called a symmetrical connection. And symmetrical just means that our download speed is just as fast as our upload speed. In the older days, many things were sold in a different package. And so download speeds were often much faster than upload speeds, because the common perception was that most people were consuming information from the internet, so that they needed to have a faster speed coming down. However, when we are doing things like we're doing today, where we're doing video conferencing and we have to share images or share things from our own computer, we also need fast speeds that are going up to the internet to share with others. And so a symmetrical connection is one of the best things that we can have. Whether or not we have it, I know, is another thing, but that is what we want to ask for, and that is what we want to pursue. And we also want one that is very fast. And so and scalable. Something scalable means that it can increase over time as our needs increase for bandwidth. We want connections that can also grow with our needs. And so we cover these sorts of concepts in the toolkit. But that bandwidth thing, has become so important because so many of us experienced the power of remote connectivity during COVID. And I think even with folks who had not had technical knowledge before, having this knowledge today and these experiences today have shown us how important it is to have this bandwidth. The next section that we have is called Broadband Technical Operational Support. And this is recognizing that our technology is gear, but the people who make our technology work are very important. They're equally important, and sometimes more important than any of the gear that we have. And so in this section, we learn and think about the people who are helping us with our technology, which is our available technology support. Things like how we keep staff trained and knowledgeable about technology. The toolkit's a great way to do it. It's a self-guided toolkit. There's no cost to getting it. So it's one way that you can have staff training, is simply by getting the toolkit and going through it and learning things that you didn't know before. There's other things, though, that we need to consider. Sometimes we don't realize or know that we should be able to expect technical support from our internet service providers. So the toolkit addresses our ISP support and the way that support might work. We cover effective ways to make requests of our internet service providers so that we're on the same page, so that we get responses and we get good responses and we can trust the information. And also talk about things that some ISPs offer, which are service guarantees. And these are levels of service. For instance, let's say we're buying a connection at a certain speed. We want to make sure that we're getting what we're buying all the time because it's never inexpensive for bandwidth. And so we want to make sure that we have that. So a lot of libraries don't even know that you have the right to get what you're paying for and to understand what you're paying for, and different ways to test for that and to have very effective dialogues and conversations with internet service providers. A section that we have expanded quite a bit for the new version of the toolkit that's just out is building your own network of support and advocating for your library, because it takes more than just us. We are so much more powerful when we're able to be together with our peers, no matter where they are. They might be across the country, they might be in our own neighborhood, but people that are in a situation similar to us or serving patrons in a similar way is so powerful to get together. And so this, there's actually like two different sorts of sections to this building a network of support and being advocates for your own library. One of it is around technology support and banding together with others to just understand and have a peer group together to talk about tech and to learn together, to ask questions of each other, etc. There's also building relationships with other folks in your community who may be able to help and offer assistance with technology, or perhaps you're able to offer them assistance with this. That's the best partnerships, where we have a symbiotic relationship with each other, where we can help each other and bring each other up. The section also really talks about relationships to expand the support for your library and what you're trying to do with technology in your library. Technology is expensive. We want to make sure that everyone knows that the library has it and that it's working well, and finding out new uses for it in our community. So there's also sections on creating and making an outreach strategy, just being very effective in getting your word out and working with other folks in your community. And then, of course, evaluating the efforts that you're taking place. And that way you can make any course corrections or improvements to that sort of messaging. Another section that's been expanded quite a bit is our broadband and IT funding opportunities. Technology is not cheap, and especially if we're coming in from kind of the older way of thinking about library things. We used to be able to buy certain things in our libraries and we didn't have to buy them again ever sometimes. In the case of technology, it's almost like picking up an hourglass, right? When we get a piece of technology, we picked up an hourglass and we've turned it over, and the sand is coming through that hourglass, and at some point that technology is no longer going to be as effective because our technology keeps moving forward. It keeps getting better, more powerful, and so our older technology does not last as long. So this is addressing just the budget needs that we have to stay current, or hopefully even to stay ahead of some of the tech challenges that we have. So this goes through building a technology budget, specific budget, identifying projects to fund, estimating the required resources and costs that you have for different sorts of technology projects, maximizing E-rate and other assistance funding that you may be eligible for, and getting the most from any of outside assistance, and a kind of an inventory and ideas for grants and other funding sources. We also have, like, in the process of researching, you know how things are, and when it comes related to library, one thing relates to another, relates to another, relates to another. And so we have a section that is a collection of resources that are related to everything that we're talking about, and really expands upon some of those tangents, some of those ideas that come from our core activities with the toolkit, which is really around improving connectivity and getting better connectivity. There's lots of things that are related this day. And so we think that there's things here that you would find helpful. There's resources on E-rate. There's also resources on content filtering, on filtering the broadband content that is required if you receive federal assistance. But sometimes people want to filter for other reasons, and so it's really good to go into that with some knowledge instead of trying to stumble around and understand what might be happening with filtering. It's changed quite a bit, and there's lots of things to think about there. There's also more resources on broadband networking. There's things on best practices like data backup. Some of the conventional knowledge around internet security, for instance, ransomware has become a big problem. And really one of the best things that we can do to lessen the impacts of ransomware, which anyone can get hit from ransomware. Unfortunately, it's a horrible situation, but it's having data backups that are offline, that are not connected to the internet. They're safe because they're not connected. And then if there were some trouble with being hit by ransomware, at least your data is protected. So we cover data backup. Also have resources pointing to digital inclusion and equity. And this is one of the best things that's happened in my life being a technologist. I so love having a different term that's aspirational, that gives us an aspiration to achieve instead of something that just describes the problem. The older terms were like digital divide and the have and have nots. But when we're talking about digital inclusion and digital equity, we have something altogether to work towards. And we also understand that it's not just the technology or the connection to the internet that's important. It's not just the technology that we use to connect to the internet, but it's the importance of understanding how to use it powerfully and the role of every library person in helping our communities use their time and efforts and work on the internet in the most effective way possible. We also have resources here for free technology related training opportunities and different resources. I know that most of us are hungry to learn so many things, and there's so many things to learn all the time. So this is a collection of relevant links. There's grant funding opportunities and resources links in here. There's also links to some nuts and bolts things like internet use policies. It's really good if you're going to have an internet use policy. It's really nice to have some examples to look at to help you build your own. And so that's something that we include here. And also resources for purchasing computers, software, and equipment are one of the links. Maybe the first section that you want to look at before you look at anything else is the glossary. The glossary is very popular because it takes some of that jargon that you keep hearing when we're talking about technology, and it gives a definition, and it's so handy to have a relevant thing to use when it comes to technology to look up really, really quick. You see a list here: Ethernet, firewall, latency, router, Wi-Fi extender, wireless access point. There's lots and lots of different terms in there, and it's really handy to have something very quick that's connected to this resource. One of the ways that people use the toolkit is often one of the best ways to do it is to print it out on paper and do your inventory by walking around your library and writing notes and writing responses to the questions. And so having the glossary right there, it's much handier than looking it up on Google. That's our idea anyway, and I hope that that's how it works out for you. So you might wonder what we discovered with our site visits. The first, of course, is insufficient bandwidth, not having fast enough internet speeds or high enough quality internet connections. Also insufficient data wiring. So this is the Ethernet cabling, the data wiring inside the library building. In a lot of cases, it needed to be improved or replaced. There were also very inefficient network setups. An example of an inefficient network setup is if you have, and you might not know the terminology here, but a data switch, I'll tell you what that is. A data switch is that light, or that box with all the blinking lights that all the cables plug into wherever your central wiring location is in your library. And often it's the same place where your router is, where your broadband connection comes into your library, it hits your router, and then your router goes into a switch. And that switch distributes through the cabling all of the internet connections throughout your library. Well, sometimes people plug one switch into another switch, and then sometimes even into a third switch or more. And that's called daisy chaining. Every time you plug one switch into another, unless it's specifically designed to have what's called the high-speed backplane, a high-speed connection between those switches, the switches at the end of the line, everything gets slower, it starts performing well, or starts performing poorly. So that's an example of an inefficient network setup. Also, old and obsolete equipment, stuff that should have been retired a long time ago. Just because something still lights up and appears to be working, it might not be worth having anymore. It might be so old that it's not really giving you very good performance. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that when we look at the mapping your network. Poor Wi-Fi coverage is also there, and we give you a tool, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that, show you ways that you can find where your Wi-Fi is performing well in your library and where it can be improved. And then also we saw that a lot of folks who otherwise would participate in E-rate, and at the time this was mostly public libraries, this was before the new eligibility opportunities for tribal libraries. Even a lot of public libraries were not participating in E-rate for a really good reason. They didn't know what they needed. But after going through the toolkit, it was very clear what they needed, and then they started looking at those issues. The result of the toolkit is something called the Broadband Improvement Plan, and this is a solid plan that you can make for your library that looks at things that you should do short term, like 0 to 3 months, and things that you might want to do in the long term, 3 to 12 months or longer. And this is a way, often as we're going through the toolkit, we come up with a list of things that need to be improved, actions that we want to take to improve things. And so this is a way to sort out things that you need to do today versus things that maybe you can do next year or later, something that might require more time or more funding or more strategy to get. But every time we visited a library for the toolkit, we found things that needed to be done right away and things that needed to be done in the near future coming up. So I'm going to talk about a couple of tips and takeaways from the process, and then we'll open it up to questions that you might have about your own connectivity or about how the toolkit might be helpful to you. The first is, if you've never done this, we want to encourage you to perform a speed test of your network, and we want you to do it in a very specific way using 2 different resources. And so what we suggest is that you use the Ookla speed test, which is speedtest.net. You can see it to the left of your screen on the slide, and that's one of the very popular commercial sorts of speed tests. And on the right, there's also something called MLab, which you may not be familiar with, maybe you are, but MLab serves, it takes a nonprofit approach. Ookla is a commercial speed test provider. MLab is a more to serve nonprofit and public entities. And the reason for having 2 tests is it's really good to find what different entities report as your actual speed, and you'll find that they vary. Both of these tests also have different quality measures, the quality of the connection on the measures, and you can see that listed out really clearly on the MLab side, where we not only have the download and upload speeds, but we also have something called latency, which is the delay when you click on a link and you wait for a response. That's the measurement, the time measurement of the delay there, as well as retransmission as one of its specifications. Retransmission is when it tries again to connect in a data communication. Now, if you're looking at the numbers there, you can see that in both of these cases, the download speeds are much faster than the upload speed. If you look on the left, I think that's the easiest one to see really quickly. The download speed is almost 40 megabits a second, which is not bad. That's pretty good. The upload speed is just over 11 megabits a second. And so what we can tell from that reading is that where this was tested, there was an asymmetrical connection. So in other words, it's faster one direction in the download than it is in the upload. And so just knowing that about your connection is really important. One thing that's new in the toolkit is we're providing a worksheet for you to use to be able to measure your speed test results. And you'll see that there's a series of blocks here to record your results in. There's 5 per page, because the best way to really tell the real story of what's going on is not just to use 2 different services and compare the performance on those speed tests, but to do it over several days to see if you have any patterns. And so what we suggest doing is doing your speed test at about the same time of day. Usually for most libraries, that's first thing in the morning when you're reasonably sure that no one else is using the internet connection, and seeing what sorts of trends that you see. Sometimes it looks identical. You're getting very close to the same speed test results and quality results. Sometimes it will vary greatly. The bottom line, though, is after you have performed this test, let's say that you're a library where you're not sure that you're getting all the bandwidth that you're purchasing. You can call your ISP and you can say something like, hey, I think our internet's slow. And they'll check it and they'll say, a lot of times they'll say, it looks fine. It looks fine from where we're at. We can't reproduce your problem. Well, if your internet is slow, you can document it here. You can create these measures over a series of days. And when you do that, let's say you do find that your performance over several days is slower than the performance that you are buying, than the speed that you're buying. When you call your ISP, you can say, hi, we need to join together to solve a problem. We've been testing our internet and it seems like our performance is lower than what we've been purchasing. And we would love it if you could help us correct or find the source of this problem and help us correct it. That having that knowledge and that information and that data is so helpful to the ISP, and it changes the nature of your conversation with them if you have an issue, because you're bringing them information and tests that you've done, and you're saying, hey, we need to do something about this. So this is one of the things that we think is powerful in the toolkit to help with your own internet connectivity. Another thing is we all know what Wi-Fi is, kind of, right? We all kind of know what Wi-Fi is, but what is it really? Well, there's several different tools that we recommend. The one that you're seeing a screenshot of here, this is called, this is a Wi-Fi Explorer is what it's called. This runs on the Apple platform, but there's Wi-Fi stumblers that run on every computer platform, including Apple, Microsoft, sorry, it's been a long day. Windows PCs on Linux, if you're running the Linux operating system. But the idea is that they're showing you something about your network that you can't see with your eyes. You can only see this with a tool. And this is just running off my laptop when I took this screenshot. And up at the top, all of the networks are listed that are within the Wi-Fi range or readable range of my my computer. And I can know an awful lot about those networks, including how strong the signal is, the channel that it runs on, etc. And one nice thing about knowing the strength of the signal is if you have your laptop on and you're looking at the signal of your Wi-Fi access point, you can walk around your library and you can find where there are very strong signals, and you can also find where there are dead spots. And if you find some dead spots, you can use that as a way to improve that. And I remember one of the site visits that we did in New Mexico in a tribal library. They were serving a bus stop area right outside the library. And they wanted to do something awesome, which is provide Wi-Fi for folks waiting for the bus. But the Wi-Fi signal was weak. And so we did this test where we walked, and we could see that as soon as we walked outside of the building, the Wi-Fi signal went from being fairly strong to just dropping almost dramatically. Why? Adobe. The library was made out of Adobe, which of course is earth, and it's got that wire structure at the core of the Adobe to help it with its with the formation of the walls. And so that was providing us a shield of the Wi-Fi signal. So, but by knowing that, we were able to see that all we needed to do is to either put an antenna for Wi-Fi outside of the library, or maybe put it close to a window where it would help get a stronger signal. A tool like this also helps us if we're in a place with lots and lots of Wi-Fi signals, helps us choose the right channel or the right area for us to operate our Wi-Fi signal on. Because sometimes we have too many strong signals that are right on top of one another, and they will fight with each other and cause performance problems. So this also helps us manage that. But just being able to see Wi-Fi is really powerful. Another thing that we have is a network diagram, and we have an example of a network diagram on the left, and there's a space on the right for you to draw your own network diagram. And this is something that we provide a resource for to show you how to do that. It's amazing. I would love for everyone on the planet to have their own network diagram, whether it's at your house or in your library or in your office. The reason for this is by having a network diagram, many people can look at it and do problem solving. When we have it all on paper, it's very powerful. It can also understand any performance problems we're having if we know that a very simple fact is our networks can only operate as fast as the slowest component in the chain. And so if one of our components in this chain of network equipment is not running correctly, or it's too slow, or it's too old, that could be causing our problem. And so this is a very, very simple way to do it. We don't have time, of course, today to go through drawing the network diagram, but I love showing people how to do it. And when we do it live, people they do it, and they show me their network diagram as we've been going, and they understand things. So before we get into questions about things, next steps for the grant is we're further refining and supplementing the toolkit. We're on version 1.5, but we're going to try to get that 2.0 version done this summer. But we have 1.5 for you, and we want you to download that. And as I said, after I'm done speaking, I will copy those links into the chat. We're working with our advisory board members. Nicole is one of our wonderful members of the advisory board, and making further improvements to the toolkit. We're also working with tribal and rural libraries to improve outreach. And so being so fortunate to be able to speak to ATOM, if you think that a visit would be useful for your library to go through the toolkit process, please get in touch with me. I would love to see if there's a way that we could visit your library. In this grant, we were very careful to not we were doing more of a train the trainer sort of thing for broadening the impact of the library, with one exception. We want to get out to more tribal libraries directly and to perform the toolkit more directly with more tribal libraries. So if this is something you're interested in, we want to hear from you. Just let me know, because we want to do that, and it's great. It's a lot of fun. For other users of the toolkit, though, we are doing train the trainer and train the practitioner curriculum so that we can have state library organizations and rural and education networks join together to get out and implement this toolkit. And so many people already have, but we want to get it out even more because we know it makes a difference. We also have resources here. You can follow us on Twitter. We have a brand new Twitter account, and we're publishing information as fast as we can. And again, we've got that brand new version of the toolkit. We want you to download that. And then Stephanie's email address is there. Please reach out to Stephanie, but please reach out to me as well. If there are questions you have, if you'd like to join our mailing list, or if you think you have a candidate tribal library that you think could use a visit from the toolkit. So we have about 10 minutes left, and I would love to open the floor to any questions that anybody has. And I'm going to make sure I've got a chat window open so I can see things. If you have any questions, you can ask them with your microphone or in the chat window, and I do have the chat open.
Hello, I wanted to thank you, Mr. Block. That was incredible. I have been, I always kid around and I tell people I failed at retirement. I'm 70 years old. I retired 7 years ago when I was 63, but I tend to stay back in it. I was an IT network person, a web developer, application developer, all that good stuff. And I build dashboards, actually. I've gotten all the data for New Mexico tribal libraries, where I built out a dashboard showing mapping, data, cost, upload
Nice.
download speeds and the like. But everything that you're talking about is perfect, because what we wanted to do, I work with third-year engineering students that come out to New Mexico from Worcester Polytechnical Institute. And just pre-COVID, we were going to put in sniffers at schools and libraries to actually do network analysis. And we were working with, I don't know if you know Bob Balance. He used to be with NTIA
Okay.
during the Obama administration. And we worked with M-Labs to do data analysis and speed testing. And I did that in a lot of the Pueblo areas throughout the whole state of New Mexico. But one of the things we'd love to see is what you talked about. You talked about every point that's right on target. But one in particular was to build networks and get students to actually be the players in that. Students from the community. We had a training here in New Mexico where was put together to teach young people how to do fiber, actually do connections and setting up physical network kind of things. And I like to build out the physical network in a mapping environment, and then input all that data, and then teach the kids how to do network analysis on their, be it their library network, their school network, and so forth. I think that would be an incredible project that we probably should be able to get National Science Foundation funding, run it through all the tribal communities throughout the whole United States, and really tackle this stuff, and then give students a future in terms. I mean, that whole industry is wide open. So
that is correct. Our reliance on networks, I just so appreciate everything that you're saying, because it is so important. If we understand just the basic how things route, like our connection to the internet and our internal connections, there's nothing there that even a layperson can't understand, at least conceptually. And it's so important that we do understand that, so that we can we can control our destiny. We understand what we need, and we can advocate for what we need, and we can make sure we stay away from things we don't need or want. Right. And I love your idea for that program and involving students, especially young people, and being invested in that.
Yeah. And I'd love to, I'll share the link. Is your email someplace?
Yes, it's on this on the slide that's up here. It's a funny email address, I know, librarylandtech@gmail.com. And I'll put all those in the links after the presentation. I don't trust myself to do it while I'm trying to talk to you. I think I would goof it up.
I don't blame you. Yeah. No, but honestly, what you've said, and that also could help with the whole digital equity issue, digital divide. Yes. Lack of understanding, and we changed that lack of understanding into an educational opportunity. And honestly, your presentation, like I said, I've been around the block for quite a long time, and your presentation today has been just incredible. I want to thank you. It was really amazing.
Thank you so much. I feel very fortunate. Thank you.
No, you're welcome.
All right, let's give Carson some hard questions, instead of praise of compliments. he really is a fantastic resource for understanding some things that can seem a little complicated, but when you get down to it, it's systems. It's systems that we have the power to understand, and we can really equip ourselves with some of this knowledge. What other questions do you have for Carson?
Don't forget the invitation request to, if you think that a library close to you, or a library a tribal library would be a great candidate for a visit, please let us know. COVID put us behind. We were not able to get started on that because of COVID, but we are very, very hopeful that we can get out in the field. And we would like to do direct toolkit visits. So please do let us know. And Nicole's absolutely right. Push back. If I said something doesn't make sense or you want more explanation, you have the right to ask.
Looks like we have a question in the chat. Let's see,
Good.
from Nikos Pastos. It says, in Indian country in Montana and Alaska, we're seeking for underwriting to obtain devices and technical training groups for community groups. Are you aware of any device grants? Is refurbished okay?
Yeah, okay, so I'm not in touch with specific device grants in both of those areas, even though I will be doing a training tour in Alaska. This is not, the toolkit will be part of that, but I'll actually be doing that for the Alaska State Library. So if you or anyone you know would be benefit from a 2-day computer training, it's similar, Nicole, to what we did in Arizona together. That'll be coming up in a couple of weeks. So please reach out to the State Library of Alaska. They're publishing that. And I thought they were also trying to get some outreach. In terms of a refurbished, that's a conditional yes. The good news is that processor requirements for many of our applications have not needed to increase at the same pace if we're running PCs as other pieces of technology. So I do think that as long as things are not too old, and of course that they're functional, right? If you looked at my computer keyboard, you'd be astonished because many of the keys are worn out because I just run it as hard as I can. But I think that a refurbished is okay up to a point. If it's too old and it's not performing well, then it's not such a great idea. But I think we have more of an opportunity, and we can be using computers that are between 4 and 6 years old. Older than that, I don't think so. I think they're getting way too old. But that is just my personal opinion. And there's a lot of variables there.
Thanks, Carson, for taking that one. I have a question.
Yeah.
When you're scheduling these and planning for these site visits to go over the toolkit, who should be in the room? What, who should we be inviting in?
That is a great question. Whoever is involved in those day-to-day problems that come up, especially with patron needs and you're not sure how to solve those, that person should definitely be in the room. And then if possible, the technology person, any technology person that you work with, whether it's someone who's on staff, a library worker, whether it's an affiliated, like a tribal IT professional who helps you, or even if it's a volunteer who is helping you with your technology, like your husband or your wife, for instance, who may be helping with the technology. That provides the most powerful group to have, is someone that understands the usage and the requests that are coming in, and someone that has some understanding of the technology so that we can all have a conversation together.
Excellent. Any final questions for Carson?
Yes, this is James Neal from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. Good afternoon, everyone. Hello,
Hey,
Carson.
James.
Yeah, I just had a quick question regarding outreach to tribal libraries and what we know as, at IMLS in particular, what we call our digital infrastructures and initiatives, so that there are shared resources among libraries. What are your plans to hopefully be able to provide a system whereby which tribal libraries can learn from one another as you interact and engage with them? Thank you.
Thank you, James. Yeah, that is such a great question. We have similar cultures in library communities and tribal communities, and the idea of being hyper local and being sensitive to what works in a regional or a very local sense is very important. I would say that we have not explored that as strongly as we need to do on the tribal side. And I think we have more work to do in that. And we're open to all suggestions, especially anything that we can do to help provide that kind of convening around technology. We know one thing that's in common across all the board is there's library culture and there's geek culture. which seems to transcend all the other cultures, right? And so we know that that is a good focal point. If we can do like, to go back to Nicole's question, if we can bring together the technical side and the library side to form a team to solve problems and to grow and to be able to advocate together, that is what creates the most powerful situation. So I think that that formula is what we need to build from to create that.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Carson, for sharing all of that with us. You know, we will be able to share all of the slides from the presentations at the conclusion of the workshop tomorrow. ATOM will be making all those slides as well as the recordings available, so you can kind of rewatch and click on all the links that the presenters have been sharing as well. But now we're going to skip along to our next presentation, which is really more of an applied version of, you know, how can you use all this great bandwidth coming into the library to enhance and offer some strong programming for your communities. So we're going to introduce Donovan Pete with the Navajo Nation Library, who's going to talk about virtual story time for us. Donovan, you're I think free to share your slides if you're able to, and we'll get started when you're ready.
All right, sounds good. Let me try to find where I put it. Okay. Okay. Well, it's kind of the fun title of the little talk here, or at least presentation. So, you know, it's always fun to, as far as the title, you know, kind of Navajoize things, to pluralize everything. So let's virtually hear some stories. So as any introductions goes with Navajos, so Yat Esh A Donovan Pete Yinshkia, Nakai Denet and Shlan, Denet Kiani Bashishin, my Dishkishin Dutch not or the net Kachini, Dutch Nelle, Arotsen Nasmas A Datmasha. I went to the University of Arizona, so I got 2 master's degrees from there. One in linguistics, which focuses on Native American languages and linguistics. So I got that done back in 2020. And then I also got the Library and Information Science back in 2019. So, so I went to Johnson & Wales University out in Providence, Rhode Island, which is so it's website management, e-commerce is what I got it in. So kind of my background in kind of working here, or at least doing what I'm doing, you know, 4 years of linguistics experience, especially doing a lot of analytical type of research into our own language, the Nepazad. So kind of doing phonetics, phonological, especially kind of seeing how and what ways language works, how everything comes together, which kind of leads into the presentation I'll be doing tomorrow. So, you know, that could be expanded on. So I have about 6 years of library and archives experience. So I've worked in public, academic, digital, other tribal libraries that I happen to have gotten experience in. And especially working in a digital archive, especially doing that with the Museum of Indian Arts and Culture, specifically the Indigenous Digital Archive. So working with Dr. Anna Moyo Naruto on the different tasks that they had. That should say 2021. But I started here at the Navajo Nation Library about a year ago, which is kind of like the late May is when I actually started. Around then I was the acting program supervisor and transitioned into the acting community library manager. So there's Navajo Nation has its own system, and it can be a little bit interesting. So almost 20 years of graphic and web design experience. I first started in high school So that's how I was able to kind of put the Navajo Nation logo together, put our everything together basically, and then a lifetime experience of Benek Etchit. Language, culture, spirituality, things like that. So, it's always fun to kind of do that in a Billigana way of listing, what your experiences are. So the Navajo Nation Library has 3 libraries. We have the main library here in Winter Rock, one in Kienta, and then another out in Torreon Community Library in Torreon, New Mexico. So the main library altogether, or at least here in Winter Rock, we have 80,000 materials and declining, which is, it's always funny to say, and I'll expand on that more later. So we have the largest Native American and Navajo collection. It could either match or exceed any academic library. So that's kind of, the point where a lot of people like to come in to use the Navajo Nation Library because of the items that we do have. We do have computers and Wi-Fi internet connectivity, and most of it primarily used here at the main library. Kienta does have Wi-Fi and computers, as well as Torreon. Torreon actually has Starlink internet after a situation came up about them trying to use E-rate. So it's a really long story, but they do have connectivity through Starlink. So really happy on that end. In coming into the Navajo Nation Library, things were kind of at a standstill. They definitely were about the books, because ideally people still think of a library as a place of books. And as many of you are encountering, or what you're going forward with, you want it to be more of a community hub. You want it to transform from this place of books into community based. So you want people to, come in and use your spaces. You want them to use your computers, everything that you provide, you want them to have that. So here at the Navajo Nation Library, that's kind of what we had decided to push forward with. And so because of that, we also started to remove items that weren't circulating, which really opens up the spaces around the library. So we do have a lot of donated items, especially books and shelves. So the shelves are like big, metal and wooden. So there's something in there to where we could remove a lot of that space and to bring a lot of sunlight, to make it more brighter around the library. Otherwise it looks like, for us, like a dingy cave. So, it's like, yeah. And then also we really want to invest in digital resources and different services. So especially Libby, Hoopla, perhaps, but that's something we're definitely still exploring, because we really want to get e-readers or tablets or things like that. So, that's one of the part of what we're trying to do is basically, quote unquote, modernize. So a lot of what many people outside these tribal communities, they don't know is, a lot of our places are still facing the digital divide. And, nowhere is that more abundant and clear than the Navajo Nation. We are the landmass of West Virginia, the landmass size of West Virginia and the Four Corners area of the United States. And, outside in a lot of the larger metropolis cities that they have connectivity, they have all these things that, when you go there, you're like, wow, this is really great. Like, I never knew libraries could do this. And then, you eventually go to your own tribal communities, like, that's not here. So that was kind of the encouragement that I felt when I was pursuing my library degree was, how do I take these things? How do I take these things as theory and thought and apply it? What are the thoughts in order to make those steps? And one of the really big ones was always internet connectivity, broadband, things like that. So it's bridging the divide is, it's always the interesting part of trying to figure out how and what a library can do. So yeah, so that's kind of the vision, is also doing that, how to bridge the divide. As you all know, we were all in, COVID just really turned everything upside down for many of us, not only, in libraries, but in, our own lives with family, friends, everything. So, it top to bottom, and, nowhere is that more affected than, of course, libraries. So, that effect really put in lockdowns and stay-at-home orders here at the Navajo Nation Library, or I should say the Navajo Nation altogether. So no one could come in and out. There was mask mandates, strict curfews. So it all just, everything was affected. And so, just like every other library, pandemic protocols, everything kind of skewed things for a bit. So yeah, kind of going back to there. Yeah, so so those type of things that happen. So you because you're always used to what you have done before. And when I was told a lot of by my staff members of what was done before, they did a lot of readings. They worked with children. They had people who spoke Navajo, and they would read in the language. They would translate on the fly to talk to to have these different events and programming, and doing it all completely in Navajo. So being very fluent to be able to do that. So we had around 130 individuals, I think is what I was told. And they would come in to use the Wi-Fi, print services, computers, things like that. So, and a lot of our adult fiction, nonfiction collection wasn't very circulated. So that was very limited, but my predecessor wanted to continue that, to acquire more books and to make that circulate. So there, when we looked at the stats, there was a high circulation for children's collection, and people just coming in to use the Native American and special collections. And so, people have written parts of their dissertation here, which is really interesting because we don't have that online. We don't have it digitized or anything. So a lot of the materials that we do have are in the back, or at least in the special collections, Native American area. So we also had readings, read aloud, that was conducted throughout. There was also other events, poetry reading, things like that. So anything to kind of engage the community was what was being done here at the main library. Apparently I misplaced a slide. So of course we had stay-at-home orders and everything kind of locked down. So that was kind of like May 2020 till January 2021. So it was kind of a few months coming into the position, and they were still kind of figuring out how to navigate new waters, especially what's going on here in Navajo Nation, because of as many of you may or may have not followed the news, especially around Indian country, of Navajo Nation having such high numbers. Like it almost it just increased so much that it became such a news highlight that there was so much things that were propped up because of it. Different nonprofits that were Navajo based that did help in doing a lot of food distribution, different things. But also the library essentially was shut down for that time because it was seen as non-essential. And we are housed within the Museum, Library, and Visitor Center. So a lot of the other departments that are housed within here were also shut down as well. Definitely started in February, there was a lot of different precautions that we're taking here at the Navajo Nation Library. Some of it which we still use and are still implemented. So as you can see in the picture here, we have sneeze guards. We have little areas where people can and cannot be around. We really limited where and between what shelves people can and cannot go through. We sanitize, wipe everything down. There's still a mask mandate that's here on the Navajo Nation, and we still follow here at the library. So in April of 2021, around that time, my predecessor, Irving Nelson, some of you may or may not know him, but he's been the longest running serving Navajo Nation librarian or director manager. And that was 43 years of service. So I started late May 2021. Saha case, little subsection. So in thinking about how to transform the Navajo Nation Library, there was a lot to consider, especially how we essentially had to catch up. And in this case, not only just catching up, but being very informative, or at least being that centerpiece of your own narrative and being in charge of it, being in control of your own information is sort of where we started to establish our own digital presence. And so from, being in my background as far as a web developer, designer, you have to have that digital presence to really push things forward and to really make individuals aware of what you're doing, or even just kind of getting information. because you want to be in control of it. So that's kind of where slowly these were kind of the building blocks of understanding like how we have control and grasp of our own information, of what we put out there as far as our own narrative concerning the Navajo Nation Library. And in doing so, being able to apply for different any and all funding, because that's kind of where you know, everyone has guidelines and parameters as far as what you can and cannot do with the funding that you're getting. So I think for us, we really came together and thought about, well, what can we change? What do we most need here at the library? So a lot of it was upgrading a lot of our technologies, a lot of our computers, because that's what people use. So, you know, why not do that? Why not invest into things like that? You know, looking at Chromebooks, Wi-Fi hotspots, tablets, and make those as digital readers. You know, having and especially really rethinking of what we can do with the space here at the main library. And a lot of it was also working closely with our department, just so we can further build and develop our relationships and partnerships with not only different groups in our department, which is the Department of Net Education, but also the other divisions and departments that are under them, as well as other nonprofit groups, especially here in Arizona, where it's first things first, especially the Navajo region, where they are focused on early childhood literacy. So we wanted to develop that so that we can definitely make it a welcoming space for you know, all ages. And any work that has been done, you know, just to continue it as much as we can. If it doesn't work, then to refine it, redo it. So I think that's kind of where we examine and did try to, or at least try to find a common vision and aspirations. And, you know, many of my staff members following that, following the visions and, or at least what I see for what we could do here at the Navajo Nation Library. So as you can see here, this is kind of a picture, the backdrop of what you would see when you come in, but the lights are off. So when the lights are on, you know, it'll look a little bit different. But in this case, this is kind of the floor space that we're working with. Those shelves are about 8 feet, 16 feet for the longest one. So to kind of remove a lot of those and to be able to have more space, more tables, more chairs, especially improving our or our children's section, especially starting to make a toddler section there so that we can do like readings, or, you know, if parents want to come in, you know, it'll be a welcoming space where they can, you know, keep an eye on their children, but also still have an area that they can do their work, especially if they need to file or do anything with the computers here. So the thought was kind of, what can we do, like, because of facing this enormous idea and trying to figure out like how to segment it so that we can be successful. So we did it as much as we can to embrace the mandates and to kind of work around it. But luckily, from the time I first came in to now, a lot of these protocols got less stricter and stricter. So as you can see there, you know, we were able to open up more space, have more occupancy. We went from max people of 10 all the way now to where we actually have 75, and hopefully we can improve it up to 100, which is the green. So the Navajo Nation has these different levels and colors, which indicate status. And so red, yellow, green, red, you know, being, well, that should be orange. Yeah, so these levels of coloring that distinguishes occupancy level. So you know, going back, these are our outreach and events that we're kind of able to do to kind of to keep in mind about safety, but also to encourage a lot of people to come back to the library. And so as you can see here, we have Miss Navajo Nation, Niagara Rockbridge here, who is currently serving as Miss Navajo, handing out treats. We did a large book drive. We had about 250 books that we gave out to parents, families, students that came around. So we got the president, Mr. President Jonathan Nez involved, and the First Lady as well. So as you can see there, that was our trunk or treat event. some more pictures. As you can see there, we did try to dress up our tribal vehicle as much as we can. And then on the other picture, you can see all the young folks that did come out, all the children that wanted to be part of this event, because this was, you know, it's been a while since a lot of large events had taken place in the Navajo Nation, because everything started to be canceled or postponed. So Trunk or Treat was one of the reliefs that many people did have. And so we did involve a lot of our community partners, and that's how we kind of went on to really build on that relationship. Another one that we did in February was actually blind date with a book. We tried to wrap, or staff members definitely tried to cover a lot of the titles, so people didn't judge a book by its cover, quote unquote. So this was kind of the result of it. So people can pick out books, whatever they want, and then that way they could almost guess as far as what kind of books. And this was around the time that we still had new books to give out, but we were also giving out a lot of our old books as well. So things that we were deleting from the catalog and everything. So that was kind of another part of why we were doing a lot of these outreach events, was to figure out how to distribute a lot of our old books. And then as of April, we did last month did a reading scavenger hunt. We had multiple participants. So hopefully either today or tomorrow that we will announce prizes and individuals who did win, first, second, third for the scavenger hunt. All right, so now to kind of the more meat of this presentation, virtual readings. In January of 22, N2AWA, which is Navajo Tribal Utilities Authority, Wireless and NID IT, or Department of Information Tech, they began putting in fiber optic lines and adding in new wireless equipment here at the main library. A lot of it was because of E-rate. And through E-rate, we were eligible and got Category 2, which is the thing that puts in the fiber optics, but also the wireless connections. So we do have fiber optic speed here at the Navajo Nation Library, thanks in part to our consortium, which is another presentation, a whole lot of overview, high-level overview that I don't think I can fit. But everything else was improved, and so we did have lines and equipment installed by early March. So we definitely benefited from this connectivity. So that's how we were able to start doing a lot of our live streams and being able to have a very good line. And so one of the first ones that we actually rolled out with was the Read Across Navajo Nation, which we did back in March. So it was a proclamation signed by President Nez to encourage reading, but it was also a kind of threefold, because it was also Dr. Seuss's birthday, which you can see in the background, but also Read Across America. And then so in turn, there was Read Across Navajo Nation, which we had the involvement of Mr. President, as well as the First Lady, Second Lady, and Miss Navajo as well. So everybody did read. And we do have it, or at least Mr. President does have it on his Facebook videos or video stream. And then so the one that we really prided ourselves in, that we got together, that we were really happy that came out with, was the virtual reading with Brian Young. So he's a Navajo author who wrote Healing of the Water Monster. So you can see at the link right there that that'll take you there. I really would like to kind of show what we have done through there, but I think many of you could actually kind of go ahead and click on the link once these PowerPoints are out, so you can actually watch the reading with Brian Young. So in it, we were just letting him do his reading, but also kind of coming up with questions as far as what his focus was, and his upbringing, and how that kind of really worked into the book that he read. So it was really, really great to have Brian Young come in and do the reading and answer our questions. Just because we really, really wanted to promote Navajo authors and a lot of what they wrote, because of how interconnected like Brian Young's work is with culture, as well as almost in this modern fashion of, it's always funny to say, but walking in two worlds. So that was sort of that his viewpoint in doing that. So that was really, really spectacular reading that he did. So, links at the bottom. Definitely, once these go out, you can definitely read it over. But you can also go to our Facebook, Navajo Nation Library, go to Facebook, go to our videos, and you can see Brian Young read. And then the next one we had was Daniel Vandover, and that was back last month, actually. So he wrote 2 books, and Fallen Line Holden, as well as Horizon. Horizon was a really interesting one because it's just a wordless picture book, basically. And you have to fill in a lot of what's going on in there. And Daniel did a really, really, really good job in doing both. So he read for the reading. But he also did the interactive part with Horizon. He also has it on his website to what activities can be done. And because of how how much of a good cultural perspective it is, like you could really make your own stories as it goes. So that was a great part of having Daniel in doing his talk and his reading. When we're thinking about the virtual readings, COVID, the protocols, COVID-19 really made everything feel so limited. And there's also trauma involved with it as well. So, we've all lost someone, or know someone with that, and so forth. Like it's just the chain of people that we know have been lost. So, so these virtual readings really did help people being able to tune in whatever way they can. So because people are still kind of like very cautious. And so this was one way that it could provide, a sense of safety, security. And, a lot of virtual readings were popular with the larger libraries, but, because we're still catching up with technology and bridging the digital divide, that this was one way that we could do it. And so we're still, that's our plan, is to essentially continue it, whether it's virtual, face-to-face. And then, as you can see here, this is a quick overview of different things that we want to do here at the Navajo Nation Library. But we give a lot of thanks to USAC for helping us in getting E-rate and getting connected to now where we have a stronger fiber optic connection. Thank you. So hopefully I'm really hopeful I left time for questions. So any questions? But you can also find our website, which we were able to work with DIT to get that established. And then we're also on the major social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and soon enough, we will hopefully utilize YouTube a little bit more. So that's where you can find a lot of the Navajo Nation Library. That's our digital presence, and this is how we've made virtual readings work for us. As far as cybersecurity, it's kind of tough because I'm not an IT person, so unfortunately, don't have a lot to say on cybersecurity. Just having really good, strong passwords, checking, updating your virus systems, updating your software. That's as much as I can give. So reading through the comments, just in case anybody was wondering.
Hey there, I was curious if you work with the Navajo Press.
Navajo Press. Is that through Diné College? I'm trying to remember if Navajo Press is through there.
I think so. My book was from, I think it was 1975, and there was a course being taught, and I was curious, about accessing more information from that time.
I mean, it would be really good because we are getting summer workers here. So that's something I think we can definitely assign them. Some of the work that they can do is to kind of look into, these press, looking into Navajo press or even older books that have been, especially Navajo based or Navajo language books that and cultural books as well that have been printed years ago, and who were the ones that pressed it, or who are the publishers, I should say, and then how that we can put that in our collection.
And I would like to add a couple points on the cybersecurity that you added. Just with some of the things that you can do is multi-factor authentication. And there's various forms. There's a physical security key you can do, or you can use various applications on your program, but it's called multi-factor authentication. And using that for email accounts, bank accounts, and sensitive login credentials. And then the other thing to be aware of is like phishing emails. Emails from somebody that the name's right, but the extension isn't quite recognizable. So that's the other thing. I just really a couple of those simple ones.
Definitely. I got a question on the comments from Marla Price. So when working on grants, how do you work with two states? It's because we do have kind of our foot in both sides of Arizona and New Mexico. I mean, both of them do recognize Navajo Nation on their respective ends. So because of that, I think it's really helpful that we are, federally recognized and also being part of Arizona and New Mexico. But I don't see, how, others can, just apply. I mean, I think the more, just putting your applications out there, and it really helps, just so, you actually understand what you need at your library or, your areas and what needs improvement. But based on our own internal process with Navajo Nation that we already have to have it in mind to, figure out how we're going to use the funding and to how much we actually need, and then to kind of name off the different things, line items basically, and how that helps us in what we're doing. So it's like definitely, I think when you can come up with the narrative, that really helps. And many states are now becoming more open to working with tribal libraries. But in our case, since Navajo Nation Library hasn't done it in the past, that's where we kind of, that's the benefit for us, is being able to work with the state grants that are available through Arizona and New Mexico. So I guess my advice would just be, just apply and have a really strong narrative for that.
Well, thank you so much, Donovan, for sharing all of that. And also thank you for presenting twice. So if y'all are interested, you can hear him speak a little bit more tomorrow about some language programming through the library and some of the good work they're doing up there. So really appreciate you sharing with us, really setting a good example of some awesome things that we can do. Interested in the blind date with a book. That's a really cute idea too, amongst other things. If you have a few minutes, maybe you can answer a couple more of the questions that are coming through the chat. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and switch gears to our third presentation in this breakout room. We have Sue McNeil with the FCC, the Federal Communication Commission, Kate Dumouchel, Special Counsel at the Federal Communication Commission, and Molly O'Connor, Attorney Advisor, also with the FCC. I believe all of our presenters are here. Sue, I'm sorry if I got your name wrong there. If you have slides to share, you should be able to go ahead and pull those up. Otherwise, we can get started here.
Fantastic. And Molly's going to kick us off with the presentation. So while she is getting ready to share her screen, I just would like to take the opportunity to say Thank you so much to ATOM for including us. Thanks so much to everyone who has participated today. I feel like I've learned a ton, and I'm excited and energized about, some things that we can take back at the commission. My name is Sue McNeil. I work in the Wireline Competition Bureau on E-rate funding for schools and libraries, and I'm joined by Janae Schreiber, who is the Deputy Chief of the division that works on these issues, as well as Kate and Molly. So Molly, I'll turn it over to you to get us started.
Great. Thank you, Sue. Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for having me. As Sue mentioned, my name is Molly O'Connor, and I work on the E-rate program as well as the emergency connectivity program. So I am here to just give a brief overview of the E-rate program, as well as using needs assessments to apply for E-rate support. And I will also just give a brief overview of the Emergency Connectivity Fund program, since it came up in the chat at the end of the presentation. So just the E-rate program is one of the FCC's universal service programs, and it provides support to schools and libraries across the nation to obtain affordable high-speed broadband services and internal connections to connect students and library patrons with learning opportunities and services. The program has an annual spending cap of $4.276 billion, and this is adjusted annually for inflation. The program allows eligible schools and libraries to request discounts on 2 categories of services. So the first category of services are services that deliver connectivity to a school or library. This includes data transmission and internet access service, including special construction, which provides support for the cost of deploying new or upgraded network facilities to E-rate eligible entities. And the second one is category 2 services. These are services that deliver internet access within a school or library. And this includes internal connections, basic maintenance of internal connections, and managed internal broadband services. Okay, as for who is eligible, so eligible entities include public or private elementary and secondary schools. This is kindergarten through 12th grade, and libraries. And eligible schools and libraries may apply individually or as part of a group. So this would be a school district or a library system or as part of a consortium. And we also wanted to highlight a recent update to E-rate eligibility that was done to enhance access to tribal libraries. So in order to be eligible for the E-rate program, libraries must meet the statutory definition of a library or library consortium found in the Library Services and Technology Act, or the LSTA. And they must be eligible for assistance from a state library administrative agency under that act. So earlier this year, the FCC unanimously adopted a report and order in order to include tribal library in the definition of the library in E-rate rules. And in order to clarify that tribal libraries are by statute eligible for support from state library administrative agencies under the LSTA, and they're therefore eligible for support from the E-rate program. Also in that order, we explain that tribal councils can designate a library as a tribal library. So for example, they can do this through a tribal resolution. And tribal libraries just need to be able to demonstrate that they have 3 basic characteristics of a library. So these include regularly scheduled hours, staff, and materials available for library users. As I mentioned, this is a discount program. It provides discounts for telecommunications, internet access, and internal connections for eligible schools and libraries. And the discounts range from 20 to 90%. This is based on the poverty level of the schools, and schools and libraries in rural areas may receive a higher discount. And it also may vary by the type of service sought. So with the discount, recipients must pay a portion of their service costs. This is called the non-discounted share, which I'll go into a little bit more later. Just for an example, if an applicant qualifies for that 90% category 1 discount rate, then they're required to pay 10% of the cost for the eligible equipment and or services. And then the E-rate program would reimburse the remaining 90% of the cost. I will add more to that a little bit later on. Okay, so those are some of the basics of the E-rate program, some of the kind of basic qualifications. Next up, we wanted to walk through how the process works to apply for and receive support through the E-rate program. Just to give you a high-level overview of how it works, before you do anything, a library should conduct a needs assessment. So each year, the Commission releases an eligible services list. This lists what equipment and services would be eligible for each for E-rate funding in that year. A library should identify the eligible equipment and services that it needs, and then it would submit, this is step one here, submit a request for competitive bids from service providers. So this is an FCC Form 470, and it would be filed with the administrator of the program or the Universal Service Administrative Company, or USAC. After filing an FCC Form 470 and waiting the required period of time, the next step would be to select a service provider and enter into an agreement for those services. After that, you would file an application. This is an FCC Form 471, also filed with USAC, to actually apply for the discounts. USAC will review the applications and issue funding commitment decisions. And after that, an applicant would be able to start services, and either the applicant or the service provider would be able to file for reimbursement. So we can break down each one of these steps. The pre-step is the needs assessment. A tribal library should assess the needs of the library to determine what equipment and services are necessary to bring broadband connectivity to their communities. So we've included a few examples of information that a tribal library might need to assess. And this includes determining the bandwidth speeds that you will need to provide the broadband services to the patrons at that library. Another one is determining the locations where broadband connections might be needed. So if there are multiple branches within a tribal library system, then all of these locations could be added to your FCC Form 470 to request bids for eligible services and equipment needed at these locations. So for example, a smaller library may only need 100 megabits per second broadband service from their local provider. But on the other hand, a library system with multiple locations might end up needing higher bandwidths, as well as a wide area network to connect their library branches. Or in more remote areas where there is no available commercial services, a library or library system could consider seeking special construction to build out a network to reach the locations that they need. Another one is determining what equipment and services are necessary within the library, or what internal connections are needed. Internal connections include the equipment. These are the routers, switches, and wireless access points, and cabling needs to have in their local network. And it also includes the licenses needed for the equipment to function. It would also include the basic maintenance of those eligible internal connections. And we've also included a note down here. So there is a set 5-year budget for Category 2 services. And this is based on the number of students in a school district or the number of square feet in a library. But all libraries would be eligible for discounts on at least $25,000 over those 5 funding years. And there is no budget for Category 1 services, just to note. Okay, so step one, this is the, so once a tribal library has determined its needs, then it may start with the first step of the E-rate process, which is to file an FCC Form 470 with USAC. This is done in order to request bids from service providers for Category 1 and Category 2 services. This begins what is known as the competitive bidding process. And I'll get into that a little bit more in a couple of slides. But to provide some context, the purpose of the competitive bidding is to get as many service providers to respond to bids in order to provide more options so that an applicant can receive better services at lower prices. Program rules require that the competitive bidding process must be fair. And by fair, we mean that all bidders are treated the same and no bidder has advanced knowledge of the project information. And the process must be open. And this means that all bidders are provided with the same information. Okay, so what should you include on FCC Form 470? So applicants should include a range of bandwidth speeds for broadband connections needed. And so for example, applicants might seek bids on various speeds like 50 megabits per second to 1 gig of broadband services. This would allow a service provider to respond to the request, and then allows those applicants to select a service provider that competitively bid with multiple bandwidths. This would allow them in the future to increase their E-rate requests for future years without having to redo the competitive bidding process all over again in the case that their bandwidth needs increase. Another thing is that you cannot request a specific vendor's equipment or service without also including this or equivalent language on any documentation that would be provided for the Form 470. This is particularly relevant if you include a request for proposal or an RFP. Just to note, this is not required in most circumstances, but if an applicant attaches an RFP to an FCC Form 470, in which it would detail its needs and set out what it is seeking, then they should not say that the applicant is seeking a specific brand of routers. So by doing that, it would stifle competition, and it's against the E-rate program rules. Applicants will also need to include information on the locations and quantities that are being requested for internal connections in order to allow service providers to submit accurate bids. So the E-rate program runs by funding years. This runs from July 1st of each year to June 30th of the following year. And the annual E-rate application filing window generally opens around mid-January and closes mid-March ahead of the funding year that starts on July 1st. So for example, funding year 2023, which is next year's, will run from July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. The application filing window for funding year 2023 is expected to open in January 2023, but applicants don't need to wait until that application filing window opens to begin their competitive bidding process. Applicants would be able to post their FCC Form 470 1 year before the funding year opens. So although funding year 2023 will not start until July 1st, 2023, the Form 470 would be available this summer on July 1st, 2022, exactly a year ahead of time. And just to note, USAC has a number of really in-depth and helpful trainings that are available on their website. We've identified here the links to trainings that are geared specifically for tribal applicants, and also include a sample FCC Form 470 so you can get a feel for what it looks like. And we've also identified a link to step-by-step videos or a process for completing the FCC Form 470. Okay, just a little more information on meeting the E-rate program's competitive bidding requirements. So once an applicant files an FCC Form 470 with USAC, USAC would then post these requests for bids on its website. And service providers are able to search USAC's website for available 470s in their service areas, and then be able to respond to the applicant directly with bids based on the information included in the Form 470. There is a required 28-day waiting period that the 470 would need to be posted to USAC's website, but after waiting 28 days and reviewing the service provider's bids, then the school or library can go to the next step, which is to select the most cost-effective eligible products and services using price as the primary factor. Okay, so moving on to how to actually apply. So once you've selected the service provider, you move on to the next step in the process, which is to submit the second form. This is the FCC Form 471 application. This allows applicants to request funding for eligible equipment and services. And as I noted before, the application funding filing window typically runs from January to March before the start of the funding year on July 1st. And that takes us to our next step, which is USAC will then begin to review each funding request, and they may contact the applicant to request additional information about the information that's included in their Form 471. And then after that, USAC will issue funding commitment decisions to each applicant. And then applicants are able to begin receiving services for that funding year. So once you've started services, then either the vendor or the applicant is able to submit requests to USAC for reimbursement of the approved discounts. As I mentioned earlier, applicants must pay a portion of the cost of the discounted equipment and/or services. This is known as the non-discounted share. And there are two options for invoicing, either the applicant files or the service provider files. So an applicant would file an FCC Form 472, which is known as the BEAR form. So for example, if an applicant pays the service provider 100% of the costs of the eligible equipment and/or services, then the applicants would be able to request reimbursement of the discounted share of costs. So in the earlier example, this would be the 90% that was paid to the service provider, and then they would do that by filing the 472 to USAC. Alternatively, applicants may also pay their service provider only their non-discounted share, so that would be the 10% in the earlier example. And then the service provider would be able to request reimbursement from USAC by filing a SPI form or an FCC Form 474 to request reimbursement for the remaining 90% of the costs. It's up to the applicant and service provider to determine what invoicing mode they want to choose. And again, we do offer detailed service provider and applicant training on USAC's E-rate website. We have included links to that on the next slide, as well as a number of other really helpful links for getting started, including how to search for FCC Forms 470, as well as a link to the EPC training. This is the E-rate Productivity Center. This is where you file all the forms that I've discussed today. And there are trainings for understanding that filing system, as well as contact information for how to get help setting up in EPC. So that concludes the E-rate overview. As Sue mentioned earlier, we are happy to take some questions in the chat box, but I also wanted to flag really quickly, there are office hours on May 17th, 2022. During the session, tribal applicants are able to ask USAC experts any questions they may have about the E-rate program. And we included a link to register. This is just a great resource if you think of any question after this presentation and want to talk to someone about it. And then we did just want to run through quickly. I saw that there's a question in the chat about the Emergency Connectivity Fund program. This is a more recent emergency program. It's a temporary program. In 2021, Congress established this $7.171 billion fund as part of the American Rescue Plan Act. And it was designed to help schools and libraries provide connected devices and broadband connectivity to students, school staff, and library patrons who would otherwise lack access during the coronavirus pandemic. The FCC did adopt an order and establish rules for distributing the funding to eligible schools and libraries for the purchase of eligible equipment and services. This includes connected devices, Wi-Fi hotspots, routers, modems, and broadband internet connections that would be able to be used by students, school staff, and library patrons with unmet needs, so those who would otherwise lack access to this equipment and service at locations other than a school or library during the COVID-19 emergency period. So while the E-rate program is dedicated to on-campus service, the ECF program is dedicated to funding at-home services. And just to note, this includes all of the same eligible schools and libraries that are included in E-rate program. In the E-rate program, the January 27th order in E-rate actually aligned the definition of tribal library with the definition that was adopted and used in the ECF program. And this was hoped to align the program's definitions and make it easier for tribal libraries to participate in both programs. And since the adoption of the order, we have opened and closed 2 application filing windows, during which we have gotten $6.4 billion in requests. In light of the remaining demand, we have opened a 3rd application filing window. It is currently open and it will be open until May 13th, 2022. And during this time, schools and libraries can request support for eligible equipment and up to 12 months of services for the upcoming school year. So that's next school year. And I have included the link to the website, and that is where you go to apply. So now I am happy to try to take some questions, and I think Sue and Kate are going to join me to answer any questions you all may have.
So this is Sue. It looks like there is a question from John asking whether there's a map showing all E-rate funded locations. And I don't believe that there is such a map, although there is data, searchable data, including I think searchable by tribal location about folks that we have funded school, and you can sort by school or library, however you, by state.
Yeah, just showing that we have the links to USAC's open data platform, which includes that you can search all the data for E-rate, and there's also for ECF, all the filings for by state. It is the one at the bottom that says data.usac.org, and there's more options there.
And we'll make this presentation available too, so you'll have all these links handy.
But yeah, one example of a way to use an open data might be to find a school in your area that's already applying for E-rate and sort of talk to them about how they've done it and try to get your libraries assessed, like needs assessed, and then work through the process in the upcoming funding year. The forms again will be available for next funding year on July 1st. And then the filing window is like in January, March of next year, 2023. But it's a good thing to get started ahead of time.
It looks like there's another question here around whether tribal colleges are eligible for the E-rate program and ECF, and the answer there, unfortunately, is no. Tribal colleges are not eligible.
Yeah, I see a question about how is the network built out once E-rate brings the pipe to the school or library. Not sure what standards you're thinking about. Generally, a school or library has to go through our E-rate competitive bidding process, and then once they've selected the most cost-effective bid, they put together a contract with the service provider precisely on how it's going to actually be built. So I see there's another question about maintenance. There are types of maintenance that are eligible. If you're working with like a internet service provider, their maintenance is generally included in the cost of their monthly service. If for some reason you need a self-provision network where like the library would be the one owning the equipment, maintenance is eligible in those cases, but there are more steps in the competitive bidding process to make sure that you're choosing the most cost-effective bid when you're doing a self-provision network, because we just have to be good guardians of the Universal Service Fund support. As we wait for more questions, I did just want to sort of highlight that the commission, I mean, we are just staff of the commission, but the commission has a very active interest in getting more tribal entities to participate in the E-rate program. And I think the order that was adopted this year talks about measuring success, and we do want to do as much as we can to encourage people to look into E-rate seriously. I know that some people, I think there might be, we've heard from many people that there's a steep learning curve, but I think, the benefits are truly incredible and have connected schools and libraries across the nation and provided significant annual resources for them. So just really want people to be encouraged and know that it's possible, and that there are resources and trainings, and I think it can take a little bit of work in front, but is worth it in the end.
Absolutely. I just want to emphasize what Kate said and let you know too, if you have any suggestions for us about things we could be doing better or differently. We are thrilled to be partnering with ATOM, and we've been doing a lot of work with IMLS folks too, but if you have other suggestions of how we might spread the word, we would be really grateful.
Sue and Kate, this is James Neal from IMLS. How are you?
Hi, James. We're great.
Good. You know, it's interesting, the comments that you just made. And as I sat here thinking about E-rate and its numerous resources for assistance, can you be a little bit more specific about how those libraries that are smaller, less resourced, less technically savvy, that include tribal libraries, what are some specific ways that they can address what remains a yet cumbersome application process? Thank you.
Just got something showing that the breakout room is going to close in 50 seconds. So hopefully, if we get caught up, we can follow up with this. But you know, we're hoping to identify some success stories of smaller libraries, including tribal libraries that have been successful, that might be able to share some of the tips for how to apply. We have a lot of training resources, as Molly mentioned, and office hours, and they have a helpline staffed up until midnight the day that the application filing window closes to help folks that are running into any problems with their application. As Kate mentioned too, if there are schools in the area that receive E-rate funds, they often have a longer history with the E-rate